Hi, Advanced Web Design. This is going to be part 3 of our tabs. So when we left off at part 2, we had created our tab area, or our buttons, if you will. We created them as tabs where we can hover over them. There's some type of transition with the coloring when we hover. And then we were setting up our content tab areas. We also, in our CSS, did our styling here. Where we created the tabs, created buttons, made our buttons into tabs, and allowed us to also hover over them so that we could see if they were active. We also, in our HTML, created a class for each of our tab divs. So that way we could call on all of our tabs in a general way, saying tab contents, versus every individual tab as like home, about, and see. We also created our buttons in our HTML. And we created a class called tab links for each button. And we are setting up for an on click. So when we click, we're now going to be able to do some type of animation in our JavaScript. So first things first, let's go ahead and look at our tab contents. So we created our tabs and we have our content for our tabs. And we created a general name for them called tab contents. And this is going to apply to all our tabs. So we're going to do some CSS work about our tab contents. And that's for the stuff that's inside the content part. So like this is the home page, this is the tab about otters. It's going to be the content that we want to drop down. So I'm going to go to my CSS and I'm going to do this right above my .tab button .active. So it's going to be where all my buttons and tabs are. I'm going to make a comment and I'm going to say that this section is style for the tab content. All right, so I'm going to have that tab contents. And that's the name of my general name for all my tabs because I called it class tab contents. All right, so I'm going to say I'm going to display nothing at first. So display none. Next, some padding. We can change that later. We don't want 6 and 12. And I'm going to have a border around the content when it falls down or when it animates down. I'm going to make it black for now. I'm not going to have a top border, so I need to specify border top none. So that's going to be the content. Let's refresh. And now you see there's none. It's still not moving, but it's now displayed none of the content. And I now need to go to my JavaScript so that way when I create an active tab, it'll be available. Okay, so let's go to our JavaScript. And I'm going to put mine at the very top above the JavaScript that we had before. And this is going to be a function. So I'm going to call upon the actions of my JavaScript when I click on my button. And that's where in our HTML we have onClick. So we're creating a kind of a command for when we click on these buttons or tabs. So I'm going to call it function. This is my JavaScript. Function open tab. And then there's going to be an event. So EVT, meaning it's going to wait for some type of event. And in this case, it's an onClick event. And then it's going to be called tab name. Those are new. So in our function, we're looking for an event and a tab name. And when we have those, it's going to perform something. So we're going to have variables, var_i. We're going to have a counter because we need to know how many tabs there are and how much content there is and how much tabs there are. So var_i, that's going to be for my counter. I'm going to have another variable called tb for tab content. I have another variable called tl for tab links. And actually, let's make that not tb, but tc for tab content. So I can comment. So this is for tab content. This is for so tab links would be like the button. That helps. Tab content is the information. Okay, that's my variables. Now I need to have a counter. So I need to use a for loop. So for int I equals 0, I is going to be less than, and we're going to be taking a look at the tab content. And in fact, I skipped a line here. Before we do a counter, we need to create, we need to figure out how many tab contents there are. So I'm going to do tc equals document dot get element by class name. Oops, and it's plural, get elements by class name. And I'm looking for tab contents. So I'm getting that section by the class name called tab contents. I'm assigning it to my new variable called tc, so I can work with that. Now I need my for loop. So for I equals 0, I is going to be less than however many tab contents there are, so tc.length. So if there's 3, we're going to go through all 3 of them. I plus plus. We cycle through. And we're going to say tc at position, so it could be the first tab content, second tab content, the third tab content is going to have a style. That display is going to be none. Okay. At least right from the beginning. Now let's look at the buttons. So now we're going to have our buttons, which we called tab links. And so we're going to assign it a variable TL equals document dot get elements by class name tab links. And now we're going to loop through those. So for I is greater than, or I is equal to 0, I is less than the number of links, TL dot length, I plus plus. And we're going to do some comparisons. So we're going to say the location of tab link class name is going to be equal to the tab link, oops, TL class name replace. So we're taking that class name and we're going to make it active replace. Active. We're looking to make it active so it can do something. Closing parentheses. And then we're going to display. So we're going to do document dot get elements by ID. And that ID is going to be tab name, style, display, plus block. So it's gonna it's a block effect. And then we're gonna look for the event. So the event EVT, that current target, so wherever it's located, that class name plus equals, it's gonna make it active. Active. Okay. So this is our function that's going to do the work. When we call upon this function, it is going to tell us how many contents there are, but it's not going to display anything. It's just going to kind of put them in order so they're ready to go. Then it's also going to figure out how many buttons we have. It's going to take whatever button we're clicking on, and it's going to replace it and say, hey, it's active, and that we now need to display the information that's in for those contents. So it kind of corresponds with one another. All right, so let's go and call upon our function. So our function was called OpenTab, and I'm going to go back to my HTML and call upon it. So when I on-click for home, I'm going to call upon OpenTab. It's going to be inside those quotation marks that we had, OpenTab. It's going to be an event, so opening paren event, and it's going to call upon contents of home. So I need the name of that tab, and it's going to be a singular apostrophe, home, single apostrophe, and then a closing paren. Okay, so what that is saying is if I save that, is when I click on the button for home, it's going to call upon OpenTab function in my JavaScript. It's going to wait for the event, meaning it's going to wait for the on-click, and it's going to tell me however many table or tab contents I have. It's going to be put in order, and it's going to correspond with the content. The first content is going to correspond with the first button, and when I click on it, when I make it active, it will display the content name, which is home, based on the ID and the information. Okay, so right now it won't work for about and see, but it only works for home because that's the only time I call upon the function OpenTab. So let's go ahead and do that for the other two tabs. So I'm going to create an OpenTab event. So it's going to wait for an event, and when it happens, when it's clicked on, it's going to call upon the content for the ID about. So I got to name that by saying opening or single apostrophe. And what did I say? About, single apostrophe, closing paren. And then the same thing is going to go for C. So I'm at the button for C. It's going to call upon OpenTab function, wait for the event, and when it does happen, it's going to call upon the content for C. So I need to call upon that special ID name now, because I'm getting the ID name, get the element by the ID name, and display it as a block. And that's going to be a single apostrophe and C, single apostrophe, closing paren. Lot to think about. So I'll refresh, and there it is. Uh-oh. About didn't work, so let's double check. The reason why about didn't work, you'll see how about's not where home works and C works, is because if I go to this OpenTab about, you'll notice that I used a closing quotation mark. I need to have apostrophe. So save, refresh.